It's very different sort of sound. I think most of it is because of the two girls, with the vocals. Yeah, the vocals. Thank you, love. Kiss on the cheek. Kiss on the cheek. Okay. ABBA was unique for its music, and as a band made up of two couples, Agnetha Felskog, decades after their split, is finally opening up about the painful experiences that led to the end of her marriage with fellow bandmate Bjorn Ulvaeus. Join us as we unveil all the details. As a group, ABBA was on top of the charts, bringing their pop anthems and Swedish charm to the world. But behind the smiles and the fame, they enjoyed a love story was unfolding that would eventually lead to a painful heartbreak and bitterness. The painful events that led to the end of Agnetha and Bjorn's marriage and love life are a story that has shaped the band's music and legacy. At first, Agnetha, the blonde vocalist with a voice that could melt hearts, and Bjorn, who was the creative force and songwriter, seemed destined for a fairy tale life together. Seeing them eventually getting married was like a dream come true for their fans globally and the music industry. However, their marriage proved to be entirely different from what the world expected, leading to a painful breakup. Agnetha and Bjorn's relationship began when both were in the early stages of their careers. At that time, Bjorn was already a songwriter, while Agnetha was a rising star in Sweden's music industry. During the period of the 1970s, the music industry was in awe of the great talent and hard work that came from the group ABBA. As a musical group that was made up of two couples, their breakthrough was one that made them by far the most successful artists of that decade. The group's rise to stardom started in April 1974, when they won the Eurovision Song Contest with Waterloo. Somehow, ABBA's first meeting happened in June 1966. This was when Bjorn Ulvaeus met Benny Andersson for the first time. At that time, Bjorn was a member of the Hootenanny Singers, a popular folk music group, while Benny was a member of the Hepstars, Sweden's #1 pop band at the time. During the summer of 1966, the two groups were touring Sweden's popular open-air folk park circuit when they met at Crossroads. During this time, the Hootenanny Singers were planning a party that night and invited the Hepstars to come along. Bjorn and Benny soon found out that they had a lot in common, and when they met at another party later that summer, they decided that they should try to write something together and see what came out of it. The result of their coming together was a song called Isn't It Easy to Say, which was later recorded by the Hepstars. Little did they know that the first seeds had been sown for what eventually would blossom as ABBA. By the break of 1969, Benny decided to leave the Hepstars, after which he and Bjorn continued to write and record songs, encouraged by record company owner and publisher Stig Andersson, who was to become ABBA's manager. Stig believed in the talents of Bjorn and Benny, assuring them that they would achieve worldwide success sooner or later. Probably this was the big push and motivation they needed, especially at that time when they were just starting. Following their first single, Bjorn and Benny decided to try out a second single. It was titled Hey Old Man. At that time, it featured the backing vocals of their respective fiancées, Agnetha Felskog and Anni-Frid Lyngstad. This was the very first time the four future ABBA members appeared on the same record. Anni-Frid, who had been a recording artist since the autumn of 1967, had already met Benny when she appeared in the town of Malmö, in the south of Sweden, in March 1969. At that time, the Hepstars had an engagement at another venue in the same town. Agnetha, on the other hand, was already a successful solo singer, although at a point she got into a relationship with Dieter Zimmermann. At first, they did get along with one another, and he proposed to her. Agnetha, being a shy, naive young lady, accepted it. But as the weeks and months passed, Agnetha realized the true reality of her relationship with Dieter and decided not to be a part of it anymore. After her engagement with Dieter was announced to both the Swedish and German press, Agnetha realized that the whole thing was a setup after she overheard a conversation between Dieter and someone else. where she realized that her supposed marriage was only an arranged marriage. At that time, Dieter was already 40 years old, while she was just 19 years old. The whole idea of the engagement was to achieve a bit of fame and publicity in Germany. Stig and Björn, who were at a radio station with Benny, got talking about Annie Fried. Benny told the men how he and Annie Fried were planning on taking their relationship seriously. When he mentioned that Björn was surprised, asking him what the seriousness was for. In response, Benny told him that it actually doesn't matter since all relationships work at their own pace. All of a sudden, just while the conversation was going on, Benny then called Björn's attention to the song that was playing on the radio and asked Stig to turn the volume up. Immediately, Stig did. They heard a young female voice singing through the radio. The three of them were left in shock and admiration for the voice they heard, especially Björn. At that point, Björn was more like someone who had fallen in love with someone he barely knew. Just after the song ended, he suddenly asked who the girl was and wanted to see a picture of her. In response, Stig told him that Agnetha Felskog sang it, so Björn requested if he could meet Agnetha. Benny immediately mentioned that Björn was obsessed, and Björn responded that he thought he was in love. The other two wondered how come he was already in love with someone he had not even seen. While the whole conversation was going on, Björn was shown a picture of Agnetha, but Stig, on the other hand, broke the news of her supposed engagement to him. However, they thought among themselves that the only good side of it was the fact that the man looked so much older than Agnetha herself, so maybe her relationship with this man won't last any longer. At that point, Björn was more determined than ever to meet Agnetha, even though she was engaged. Agnetha had first moved to Stockholm almost 2 years ago, after little Gerhardt, the man who discovered her, and offered her a recording contract. At that time, she was the lead singer of a local dance band, while also working as a switchboard operator at the local car dealer. It was from here that Agnetha started writing her first song that talked about her first love, and how it ended in heartbreak. The song was called Jag var säker. Following the news of her failed engagement, she decided to move back to her parents. On a fateful day, she decided to listen to the radio, and the song that came up was an old song by the Hootenanny Singers. Just like most teenage girls at the time, Agnetha was very fond of the Hootenanny Singers, as well as the Närsters. In fact, a few of her friends even had a crush on Björn, and so did Agnetha. But she was too embarrassed to admit it, and she felt that there was no way Björn would be interested in a girl like her. Aside from that, the news of her engagement was all over the Swedish and German newspapers. Björn, on the other hand, was back at the studio with Benny when Stig disclosed the news that they booked a spot for Björn on the Jules Sylvan special for next week. He would be one of the main performers, but the sweetest part was that he would be performing alongside Agnetha Felskog in a duet. By May 1969, just when the two of them appeared in the same show, this was the very first time Agnetha and Björn would meet. It was a magical moment for the both of them, as they even went ahead to have their very first kiss on that same day. As sweet as their relationship and bond felt, the doubled-edged sword of fame led to some struggles. Let's get into the details. It was at the cabaret act Festfolk, where the ABBA couples first introduced themselves to the public in November 1970, although their first attempt was ultimately not very successful, and all thoughts on a permanent group were ignored at that time. As time went by, all they did was just appear on each other's records and work together on different projects. In July 1971, Bjorn and Agnetha got married, and in the autumn of that year, Bjorn and Benny started working as house producers at Stig Andersson's record company. Agnetha and Bjorn's relationship wasn't the only relationship that was getting serious at that time. Benny and Annie Fried had moved in together with their kids and were about to get married. At this time, Bjorn and Agnetha also decided to live together in a small apartment in Lilla Essingen. Björn and Agnetha's relationship, along with their respective music careers, have been doing really well at this time. Björn was still working in the studio with Benny and Stig, while Agnetha had just released her new album. As for Agnetha and Björn, their connection and bond were instant, and it wasn't long after that they became inseparable, and in no time became Sweden's musical power couple. The beautiful side of their relationship was just how the chemistry they shared would later translate into the heart and soul of ABBA's music. For the sake of convenience, Stig Anderson decided to refer to them as ABBA. In the spring of 1972, the first true ABBA single People Need Love was released under a different name, but became a top 20 hit in Sweden. In February 1973, they took part in the Swedish heats for the Eurovision Song Contest with Ring Ring, a song composed by Björn, Benny, and Stig. At the time of the contest, Agnetha was highly pregnant with Björn and her first child daughter, Linda. They soon found themselves in the top 3 places of the Swedish combined singles and albums chart. It was only with this final confirmation of their popularity that the four decided to put their respective solo careers on hold and concentrate on the group. Although Agnetha's sensitivity and shyness were in contrast with Björn's active and determined personality, this was a big difference in their personality that would later turn their romantic relationship into a source of constant fame and family friction. While their love story was blossoming, they both got married on the 6th of July, 1971, however. Prior to when Agnetha got pregnant, both of them felt that there needed to be one more thing to make their lives complete: having a baby. They have talked about the possibility of having a baby together from the moment their relationship first started getting serious, and even more so after they got engaged. But at this point, they were faced with conceiving just when they wanted to. It got to a point where they both started considering the option of adoption. It wasn't too long when Agnetha conceived and gave birth to her daughter Linda in 1973. She was replaced for a short period. Soon they had another child, Christian. The power couples were now faced with raising their 2 children, Linda and Christian, alongside the demands of being members of one of the top groups at that time. It wasn't long after this, and the same fame they had longed for became like a two-edged sword, and soon became their undoing. At this time, Björn was busy with the group projects and was thriving in the public eye, eager to seize every opportunity for the band's growth, while Agnetha, on the other hand, found herself overwhelmed by the endless commitments and the distance it created from her family. As a wife and a mother, she struggled to balance the demands of being both alongside an international star. This was in addition to the fact that the group was obviously in their golden period, especially after winning the Eurovision Song Contest, which shot them to international fame and success. Agnetha struggled so hard with the psychological stress that came with the constant travels the group had. As a person at this point, all she wanted was stability. Her longing for this grew more intense as she missed out on crucial moments with her young children. Despite their shared victories and how much success the band was recording at that time, Agnetha felt increasingly isolated within the marriage. Their home and kids had to suffer for the effects of their career. It got so tense and sour that though they lived together when they were not touring this time, their once sweet love story didn't feel like it again. Björn, the extreme workaholic, decided to bury himself in the studio, while Agnetha was only able to find solace in their children and the quiet countryside. As time went on, the distance between them became more noticeable, and though they tried to mend it, the pressures of their different needs and desires only intensified. The strain of fame and family life became a source of friction as Björn's ambitious nature clashed with Agnetha's desire for a more grounded private existence. Björn was all in for the long tours and appearances, believing they couldn't afford to miss out on any chance to maintain their stardom. Agnetha, on the other hand, wanted time at home with her children, feeling increasingly isolated and burdened by the pressures of their career and demanding lifestyles. These disagreements, which one could possibly say look like nothing compared to the bond they've always shared, continued to deepen over time, creating a friction that they could not bridge. Their clashes often spilled over into recording sessions, to the point where Agnetha would be so reluctant to join the group on trips. While Bjorn and the other band members made plans for extended tours on a few instances, it was revealed that Bjorn would often dismiss all of Agnetha's concerns, seeing them as unnecessary obstacles to ABBA's success. It got so serious that sometimes the repeated arguments were followed by long periods of silence, with Agnetha getting into her shell afterward. As for the workaholic Bjorn, he continued to focus on their next big project, while the emotional distance between them kept on growing. Aside from their differences in priority, Agnetha was also faced with the fear of flying, which added another layer of stress to the issues. Their frequent travel schedule and every tour announcement became a source of fear for her. This part of Agnetha was something Bjorn was never able to understand or make room for. The contrast between their public personalities and private struggles was striking to the world. To many, they were the picture-perfect couple. But behind the scenes, Agnetha was full of sadness. The big, painful news came a split. Let's get to the details. By the break of 1979, this time Agnetha revealed that she could no longer cope with all of her struggles and the pain she felt. Their marriage had reached a breaking point. It wasn't long after their separation that Bjorn immediately moved on to a new relationship. From the reports, this rapid shift was a bitter pill to swallow for Agnetha. She wasn't just faced with the hurt of losing her heartthrob, but now getting to see him moving on immediately to be with someone else in just a few weeks. The divorce announcement came as a shock to the public. After initiating the separation, Agnetha admitted that by then, she felt like a shadow of her former self, drained by a marriage that seemed to demand everything without giving back. In January 1979, the group released another single, Chiquitita, which was premiered at an all-star UNICEF gala in New York, becoming ABBA's most successful single of 1979. On a more distressing note, the release of the single coincided with the news that Bjorn and Agnetha had decided to get a divorce, although there was much speculation that this would mean the end of ABBA. So while their music brought joy to millions, Bjorn and Agnetha's marriage was filled with silent struggles. But from the outside, it looked perfect. They performed hit after hit together, smiling for the cameras. According to Agnetha, she revealed that fame changed Bjorn, and that the man she had fallen in love with, who was once attentive, supportive, and shared her dreams, became a changed person as ABBA soared to new heights. Bjorn's passion for success became all-consuming. This time he spent countless hours perfecting songs, planning tours, and overseeing production. According to her, there was nothing worse than feeling invisible to the man she loved. She also went on to state that their lives became a performance just for the cameras, and all they did was to pretend that their relationship was intact while she could feel her heart breaking. Bjorn's drive was relentless, and his ambition was totally boundless. For him, ABBA was everything. Agnetha also revealed how loneliness gradually crawled into her life during these years. Though she was surrounded by crowds of adoring fans, she still felt isolated. Bjorn, who was totally wrapped in his own dreams, seemed to offer little comfort at that time. To her, she felt trapped, as if she was losing her voice, not just in the music, but in her life entirely. One instance she recalls vividly was during a rare evening when they had time alone away from the band, and the industry demand she had poured her heart out, hoping he'd understand her need for balance and peace. Just while she was still trying to make him see reasons, Bjorn brushed her off, saying they needed to stay strong for the sake of ABBA. Agnetha described how this felt like a slap in the face, since it was as if her feelings didn't matter to him anymore. He was so wrapped up in his world that he couldn't see her pain after years of suppressing her own needs. Following their separation, Agnetha's grief was filled with a sense of betrayal, as it seemed that while she was faced with the end of their relationship, Bjorn had already moved on and never really cared about the end of something that was once so precious to them. Aside from that, some media outlets made things even worse by using captions that addressed her as the abandoned wife. Well, did ABBA stop immediately after their separation? Let's find out what took place afterwards. Following their divorce, Agnetha and Bjorn had to maintain a professional relationship for the sake of ABBA. This phase created a strain that many have described as emotionally complex. While it looked like Bjorn has often downplayed the bitterness of their split, Agnetha's perspective reveals a deeper sense of hurt. She went further to reveal some of the challenges of balancing stardom with personal needs, hinting that her voice in the relationship was often drowned by Bjorn's vision for their future. Years after their split, they both went through the phase of performing together, while their emotional wounds were still fresh, and somehow they were still able to maintain some level of professionalism for the sake of the band. Well, it wasn't long when the cracks started showing, especially in their final tours. Bjorn and Agnetha, whose interactions were once marked by warmth and laughter, became cool and formal and looked more distant. This was just a clear depiction of the distance that now defined their relationship. For Agnetha, all of the pain she had buckled up inside was not just because of the loss of her marriage, but also over the realization that she had sacrificed so much of herself to sustain a union that could not last. Bjorn, for his part, has spoken of the regret he feels over the pain their divorce caused, yet he has often emphasized the creative success that it brought to ABBA. This is a clear description of how each of them clearly saw their split. Agnetha, ever since, has remained guarded about those years, choosing to focus instead on her life beyond ABBA. Years have gone by, and though time has passed and the members of ABBA have moved on in various ways, the story of Agnetha and Bjorn's marriage remains a subject of pain for fans and the media. ABBA never officially announced the end of the group or an indefinite break, but it was long considered dissolved after their final public performance together as a group in 1982. Agnetha's later music, especially in her solo career, often carries traces of her past experiences with songs that reflect pain healing and the sadness she feels. Her decision to step back from the public eye in the years after ABBA's breakup suggests an attempt to reclaim the privacy and tranquility she had long craved for during her marriage. For Bjorn, it was different. He decided to channel his experiences into his work co-writing musicals and projects that allowed him to reflect on his past while moving forward. Yet the shadow of their relationship has never fully disappeared from his public image. Even when the group reunited for a performance, the chemistry between Agnetha and Bjorn remained a topic of public, as fans speculated on whether the time had healed any of the wounds left by their separation. According to Agnetha, she realized that if she didn't leave, she was going to lose herself completely. It was a struggle to let go of the dream they had once shared, a vision that seemed to linger in every corner of her life. In fact, she mentioned that there were days when she questioned rebuilding her choices, wondering if walking away had been the right decision. But deep down, she knew she could never go back to a life that had nearly consumed her. Slowly, Agnetha was able to rebuild herself. She poured her soul into her solo music, creating albums that were a reflection of her own experiences, her own story, and her voice. According to her, leaving was a necessary act of self-respect, and it wasn't just about leaving Bjorn, but about reclaiming her happiness. After years of separation, she sees now that her decision to walk away was not just a step out of a marriage, but a leap into her own life. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.